The Law by Frederic Bastiat, or perhaps it's Frederic Bastiat. I'm not entirely sure actually, but either way, this little book, or perhaps I should say booklet, is a work of political philosophy which I will humbly, or perhaps not so humbly, aver is one of the most important documents ever penned. It is a work which I think was, is, and always will be relevant, and which stands as a shining beacon of truth amidst an ever rising sea of lies. So, some background: Frederic Bastiat was a French economist and political philosopher who lived from the early to the mid 1800s. He died tragically young, I think, of tuberculosis. And he is regarded, even though his name may not be terribly well known today, he is regarded as one of the greatest thinkers and economists in capitalist economics and a precursor to the Austrian School of Economics, which was pioneered by like Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek, etc. Now, this book, The Law, is Bastiat's most famous and enduring work. It was written as a reaction to the then burgeoning socialist politics of the day, and its aim is to illustrate what the proper meaning and usage of the law is, and also to show how socialism bastardizes what the law should actually be and do. Um, so Bastiat's thesis with the law is that we as individuals are endowed by God, and I want to come back to that in a second because I think that's a point that may need touching on. But his thesis in the law is that we as individuals are endowed by God with three main rights: the right to life, liberty, and property. And that the only proper usage of the law is for the defense of these things and not for their infringement. Now, as I said, I want to touch upon his method of argumentation here because I know a lot of people out there will be like, that is not a philosophically sound foundation for argument here. This obviously comes from an older time where people were more ready to appeal to a deity for whatever points they wish to argue. And you would be right, that is not a logically sound manner of argumentation. But for one, you don't actually have to invoke a deity to argue rationally for the points that Bastiat does in this book. But also, even though it is unfalsifiable, it can nonetheless be one hell of a trump card. And I would refer to the founding fathers of America to illustrate that because, you know, in our declaration, they stated that we as individuals are endowed by our Creator with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And again, while that's entirely unprovable, unfalsifiable, it nonetheless served to cement the rights of the individual by placing them in hands, however dubious, higher than those of men. And if you look at other countries in the world, Canada, England, who are not founded with this fundamental belief that the rights of man are divinely ordained and that the rights of the citizenry are extended only by the government, you will see how easy those rights are to rescind. Much easier than whenever you think that transgressing one person's rights is also a transgression against the divine. But anyway, on from that, this work is directly engaging with the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And, you know, Rousseau's ideas were what France had adopted going into like the French Revolution. I'm not going to say that Rousseau caused the French Revolution, but his ideas played a big role in it. You know, the French Revolution resulted in chaos, carnage, and the recently deposed king being replaced by an emperor, which tends to be the case when you're dealing with, you know, theories of this sort. But anyway, so life and liberty, I'm not going to harp too much on because I think most people would agree with that. Or think that they would at least. Rather, it's the third point, property, that I want to harp on because this has historically been the biggest sticking point, and it is truly the dividing line between political ideologies such as the ones that Bastiat was contending with in his day. So, Rousseau, which Bastiat is kind of responding to with this, in his Discourse on Inequality, I believe it was, identified private property as the font of all inequality between people. The phrase, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it goes something like, the first man who ever fenced off a parcel of land and said, "This is mine," is the biggest charlatan who ever lived, and people should have done away with that person from the start. So he identified the ownership of private property as the source of all inequality between people. That is truly one of the most cosmically stupid statements ever made, and it is one of the most pernicious fictions which have ever been foisted upon humanity. And I'm going to try, as Bastiat did in his book, to illustrate why that is and why property rights are truly of such paramount importance. So we can see through that the schism that exists between capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is predicated upon private property, private ownership, that people have the right as individuals to own things and exclude other people from those things. Socialism, on the other hand, is predicated upon communal ownership and the belief that the world exists for everybody and that everybody has an equal share of the world, which is due them, ideally at least. That sounds nice, and it's tempting. Oh, it is very tempting, but it has some flaws. It has some crippling flaws, which I will try to elucidate. So, property rights, as I said, are of such paramount importance because they are extensions of ourselves as individuals. We own what we create because what we create comes from us. What we create, whatever it may be, would not exist but for us. So to assert that everybody owns the world, that everybody owns everything equally, is asserting a claim not only upon the world but upon other people. Because that might work if we lived in paradise where everything we needed grew on trees and none of us had to work for anything, but sadly that is not the case. And because of that, we have to create what we need in life, by and large, and not everybody can do the same things. And again, what we own is what we create, because what we create comes from us and it would not exist but for us. So to assert that everybody has a claim upon the world is actually to assert a claim upon other people's lives. It is actually a form of slavery that you're arguing for. That is what socialism actually is at its heart. Within that luscious looking apple, there is a rot, and what socialism actually is a form of slavery, the enslavement of all to all. Every person existing not for their own sake, not for their own life, but for the sake of everybody else and their faculties and their services at the service of everybody else. And that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong, because you cannot justify that except by appealing to need. But then again, need is not a sufficient grounds for appeal when what is required for the fulfillment of need is ability and achievement. So property rights are crucial. This is vital to understand, because if you do not extend property rights to the individual, then you extend no rights to the individual. If you say that people cannot own what they create, that people cannot own their own labor, their own inventions, their own creations, then there is nothing which says that they can even own their own person. No one has the right to exist at the expense of anyone else. If you would argue that that is not the case, then what you are arguing for is once again a veiled form of slavery, that some people have a right to other people's lives and creation. And as Bastiat so passionately states in the law, the only proper function of the law is for the defense of life, liberty, and property. And that under socialist politics, the law is corrupted and twisted and bastardized into a weapon, in other words, to expropriate what other people create for the sake of other people who did not create it and who therefore do not have a right to it. And Bastiat identifies like systems, what he would call partial plunder, because socialism is legalized plunder. It is legalized theft. You can doll it up with words such as nationalization or public welfare or the common good, but it will never change the fact that it is a hard, blatant theft and so therefore evil. But Bastiat identifies different kind of subsets of it, such as partial plunder, which we would probably designate today like a welfare state, and then total plunder, which is the government uh, stealing all private ownership from the populace, and everything being communally owned. Of course, that only ever seems to end up happening theoretically, because yeah, there are some insurmountable hurdles there. But yeah, Bastiat's argument here is that the only proper function of the law is to protect individuals' life, liberty, and property. And if the law is weaponized to take their property, then that is also a violation thereby of their liberty and an offense directly against their very life. Now, he ends in the latter pages of the work by quoting various socialist demagogues, I guess, who I'm not familiar with, except Rousseau and Robespierre, a couple of them. And he quotes a lot of their work to draw out the main theme of all of their ideas, which is that of control. Because that is, of course, what these people actually want, is control. Even if it is for ostensibly philanthropic purposes. Bastiat acknowledges that these people may think that they're doing good. That is, of course, I mean, no one, or almost no one, thinks themselves the villain, right? Everybody thinks they're doing good, but the thing about the world is you can be evil even when you think you're doing good. And the road to hell, after all, is paved with good intentions. And these people, these socialist politicians, start out obviously wanting to help the populace, at least nominally, but what that requires is a surrender of people's liberty and their property, and ultimately their very right to their own life. And the common theme throughout all these people in here, and it's several that he quotes in their various tracts and treatises, is that just give us control. Give us control, put your hearts in our hands, and we'll take you to the promised land. And what struck me about that is that it prefigures what I believe it was von Mises would later say in Human Action, I believe it was. The reason why socialism is so alluring to the intellectual class of society, the intelligentsia, the reason why those people flock to socialism is because socialism is intellectually flattering, whereas capitalism is intellectually humbling. And everybody would rather be flattered than humble. But the trick is in knowing what you have a right to and what you don't have a right to. And so the arguments that the people that Bastiat quotes here in this book are not really different at all from the same arguments that other people have made later, all the way up until present day. Just put your very souls in our hands. Just give us the reins, and we'll take you there. We'll take you to utopia. We'll lead you into the future, a brighter, happier future, at the cost of your property, of your liberty, and your very right to your own life. Don't fall for it. This book is, again, I think it is a beacon of truth in an ever-rising sea of lies. Because the thing about socialism is it is the most tempting thing that is the most tempting, though gravely flawed idea that has ever been foisted upon humanity. The belief that all people can be equal, that all people have a right to everything, and again, a right to other people. Again, it's just a veiled form of slavery. And, but people don't look that deeply into it. But Bastiat saw right to the heart of it. His vision was very, very acute, and he saw what the problem was. And this book still holds up pretty much just as well now as it did then. I think it always will, because as Ecclesiastes said, there's nothing new under the sun. The circumstances may change, but the people don't. People are still um, fundamentally the same now, pretty much as they were, and probably always will be, at least to an extent. And the problem, one of the problems with socialism is that it appeals only to that which is lowest in people because it promises them something for nothing. And that's also another reason why people shy from capitalism, because it looks cold, it looks selfish, it looks greedy. But at the end of the day, why is it selfish? As Thomas Sowell said, why is it greedy? Why is it selfish to want what you create, what you earn, but not selfish to want what other people create and earn? At the end of the day, life is fundamentally selfish, and capitalism is just the system which embraces that and recognizes that people live for themselves. People exist for their own sake, not for the sake of anybody else. I don't exist for your sake, and you don't exist for my sake. And if you would argue that that is not the case, then you would have to say how exactly I, who don't want to exist for your sake, somehow do, which you would have a very hard time arguing. So yeah, this book is just spitting facts all day long. It is hard truths, but truths nonetheless. And yeah, I think it is just one of the most valuable things ever written. So for that reason, I'm going to give Frederic Bastiat's The Law an A+. It holds up. It is he saw he saw the problems, even where other people did not, and where other people still had not. In this book, again, it is a shining beacon of truth in an ever rising sea of lies. So yeah, A+. The Law by Frederic Bastiat. Have you read The Law? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said today. And if you haven't read The Law, this I would recommend. This is truly like a universal recommend. This is a book that I think every human being needs to read because it it fundamentally is true. It fundamentally is true. It outlines the true rights of man and what every person can claim and what they cannot claim and why that is so. It's just hard facts all day long. So yeah, this is a truly universal recommendation from me at least. But anyway, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.